Welcome to another episode of the Social Hotelier Show with me, Sam-Erik Ruttmann. We dive deep in the world of visionary leaders, reshaping industries with passion, purpose, and perseverance. Today I have the pleasure of hosting Vanessa Thompson, a pioneer in sustainable finance and innovation who has spent over a decade driving transformational change within global corporations and trailblazing pathways toward impactful sustainable futures. Vanessa's journey spans roles at the UN Foundation, the Nature Conservancy, and the World Bank, along with leadership at Silicon Valley's Cutting Edge Ventures. Now as a managing director at the Sustainability Experts, she spearheads strategies that empowers Fortune 500 companies to meet and exceed ambitious sustainability targets. With her groundbreaking book on sustainable leadership set to release next year, I can't wait to see that one, Vanessa is ready to share her insights on how businesses can not only embrace sustainability, but use it as a catalyst for innovation and growth. In today's conversation, we'll explore the intersections of leadership, sustainability, and the bold vision that fuels Vanessa's work. This episode is not about ideas, it's taking about action to create a legacy of responsible, conscious growth. So whether you're a business leader, an entrepreneur, or simply someone who cares about the future, get ready for an inspiring conversation that might just change the way you think about sustainable success. So Vanessa, welcome and thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, let's get started. I think for our audience to get some background, and can you please tell me about your inspiration to get into this field? And you must share the story about your time at the Berkeley and the interesting course you took. So I'm very curious to hear about that part. So please share us your inspiration, how you got started.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally from Silicon Valley, or the San Francisco Bay Area. And it's a very unique culture. I would say that it's a really great place to be from. And there's countless startups there. Of course, I went to UC Berkeley, which was a huge part of the Silicon Valley kind of economy that rose out of it. And I think what's interesting about it is that we really have this kind of mindset of innovation and sustainability kind of at the heart. And nowadays there's, Silicon Valleys all over the world. People often say, this is the Silicon Valley of this particular region. But at the time when I was growing up, it was really the San Francisco Bay Area being at the heart of that. And of course, yes, I went to UC Berkeley, which was a wonderful program. I worked specifically in research that was economics related, but the econometrics was all around modeling renewable energy and things like that, which is a very unique degree program that we were able to do there, which was wonderful. And, after that, I ended up working at countless clean tech startups. You mentioned I worked at the UN Foundation, a lot of, bigger organizations as well, even venture capital groups. And seeing all of these startups and growing up in that culture, I was constantly asking myself the question, why is it that sustainable companies are able to develop IP faster, go to market quicker, and better at retaining talent? What is it about these sustainable companies, these sustainable ventures, the sustainability as a mindset that's actually helping the companies innovate more? And so that's kind of what I wanted to ask myself. And a few years ago, a book publisher reached out to me and asked me to write a book on innovation. And that really helped me dive into that topic even deeper. I had started that work at UC Berkeley, doing some research with a Nobel Peace Prize winning author, and then kind of continued that research into my own book. And that book became 60 case studies of successful businesses that have become more innovative using the principles of sustainability. And these are principles that any business can use in any particular industry that can help them be more innovative and really accelerate innovation in their business. And so that's kind of what ended up starting me speaking internationally on the topics of innovation, giving keynotes on that. And, as I was working on these workshops with different companies, I was really helping them, come up with new product ideas, helping them innovate in their organizations. And the sustainability experts, which came out of it, was a consulting practice. It kind of seemed like the next step that, companies really needed that support. I think particularly in hospitality, it's really an experience economy. And so constantly evolving that experience around the customer is so vital and so important. And so innovation around that is so incredibly important as well. So the sustainability experts kind of came out of needing to help companies with that innovation practice.
Well, that's a great name. I mean, just understanding you work for like a UN Foundation, and you are with startups. And that's always what I've heard is like organized or unorganized chaos. And when you were the startup world, how did you deal with that and to keep things in track and looking at the things from your perspective that are they actually focused on those sustainable actuals, or is it something that you were guiding them on?
Yeah, absolutely. So particularly working at a startup, one of the most important things is having a very clear vision. Because at a certain point, the minimum viable product is not even there at some points. And so what it all is surrounding around is these brilliant group of people who have to have a very clear mission and have that mission be the same across all of those individuals. And sustainability ends up being a great way to organize people around it, because you actually give them meaning beyond just a paycheck, beyond just thinking that this company might become more successful. You give them meaning, and you give them a kind of, I like to say, moon mission, where you're actually driving people to say, we are going to change the industry, we're going to disrupt the industry, and you're going to be a part of it, your family's going to be a part of it. And so when you have that as a mission, and when you have a really authentic sustainability mission, it really helps, draw everyone together. So I've been an advisor to startups. I've also worked in startups, helping them raise capital. So a number of different roles within that, and all of them were different, but creating that vision is something that's true across all these experiences.
In a world of increasing focus on quick profits, is it true sustainability possible, or is it just a marketing strategy?
Sustainability is really the key to long-term success. And I like to use this one example of a business called Interface. It was voted one of the most sustainable companies in the US. And it actually went from being not a sustainable organization at all and making a huge transition to become more innovative, investing in incredible patents, and becoming the leading sustainability firm in the United States, which is really interesting. And they did this all in the 1990s, when you didn't have the benefits that you have today of sustainability press. And a lot of people talk about, okay, yeah, sustainability is great for your marketing team. It's great for your PR. It's great for all those things. They didn't have any of those benefits, because at the time it was actually unpopular, particularly in their industry, which was manufacturing, to have sustainability at the forefront. And so they actually kind of hid some of their sustainability and actually just talked about the patents, but sustainability was fundamentally a part of their philosophy. And so I think that they're a really interesting case study, because the patents that they invested in helped them survive a few recessions when their competitors didn't. And so it's really proof that sustainability is really about thinking innovatively. And that, of course, there's the cherry on top with marketing or PR, but there's also the reverse of greenwashing, which happens quite a bit too, because sustainability inherently makes good business sense. There are some companies that actually will hide their sustainability investments and sustainability practices because it makes business sense, but it doesn't make good PR sense. So it depends on the industry. For example, there's a lot of luxury brands, including Prada, that actually have recycled plastic in a lot of their products. But because that's not good for the PR of the company, because it's a luxury brand, they actually hide that. So you have to read through their full sustainability report to find that out. They don't share that in marketing. They don't share that in PR. So it doesn't really make sense for their marketing strategy. So I would say, you have to be thinking very innovatively about sustainability. There needs to be a clear ROI. And sometimes that aligns with marketing goals and sometimes it doesn't. But you need to be thinking about it as part of your business model.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned luxury brands like Prada, but I'm seeing now on advertising on social media of similar companies like Italian companies, for instance, Loro Piana, which is very famous for their wool and cashmere, and they are recycling some of their materials to create a new product, and they are quite proud of being open about it. And I found that quite interesting and refreshing, because now things are actually coming out. It's actually quite acceptable that it can be recycled, but it has to be done at the quality. It doesn't come as a lower quality product at the end. So I think that's is always a fine line. But also, I mean, you mentioned about hospitality, and I'm afraid to say that our industry has been really notoriously about that. We are very proud of not using plastic straws anymore. I mean, and if that's where our mission is, that we are kind of in a sad state, and there's a lot of work to be done with this. Have you kind of kept an eye a little bit on about hospitality, what they are doing, and are there certain things that you think that would be very helpful from your point of view that they should pay more attention to?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, something that's somewhat overlooked to a large regard is that when we're thinking about building experiences for customers, nature is actually at the heart of that. When you think of experiences that are positive for individuals, nature is somehow a part of that experience. When you think about just the interior design, when you walk into a hotel, beautiful hotels and aesthetic places have natural elements as a part of that aesthetic. They're going to have beautiful wood. They're going to have some kinds of plants on the inside. You're going to have a water element. All of those things are vital to have a great aesthetic. So even just thinking from an aesthetic point of view, nature is a part of a fundamentally good experience. And there's tons of research around this, but it's super interesting to actually dive into. Because just when we think about a 10-minute walk in nature, of course, that lowers your blood pressure, it makes you relax, it reduces feelings of anxiety, all the things that you want to do when you're on vacation, when you're at a beautiful hotel. But what's also interesting is that it also reduces chances of cancer. It reduces all sorts of symptoms of disease. So nature's fundamentally a part of us, and it's fundamentally a part of positive experiences. And so when we're thinking of beyond just removing harm, but actually investing in a quality experience where you actually can have a higher margin and more value for your customer, you fundamentally need to be thinking about how am I going to invest in nature strategically to have a great experience. And nature is fundamentally a part of that. And I have a few examples that we can get into. But that's kind of when we're thinking about a concept of how do we want to invest in our business to have greater value, nature's at the heart of that. So we need to be thinking about how do we bring in more elements of nature to enhance our overall experience.
You're almost talking like a Finn here, because that's how we are thinking about those things. And because nature is something very important to us, and this is really the essence. Is also I really have a lot of sympathy in terms of how the way you're speaking about this part, because this is something that I'm working on regular basis, on daily basis, when we are designing hotels, and that we are designing human sustainable experiences, we call it. Maybe it sounds like a cliche, but it really means that we never cut a single piece of wood in the forest. We actually build and design around what actually lives already there, because we know that the luxury is outside the window from the room. Yeah. So that's a very interesting point that you mentioned. But one part also about in hospitality, which is quite important, and I have comes from the time when I was thinking of what is the definition of hospitality. Originally, I thought, when I started my career during the analog area, which is a while ago, it was like customer is king. That's how we were taught about these things. But now, definition of hospitality is what I talk about is community. So this is something that I feel very important, and I think I want to just maybe a question: how do you balance the needs and traditions of local communities with the goals of global development projects? Any thoughts you have on this aspect?
Yes, absolutely. And actually, one great case study from our book comes to mind with this. So I'll tell you kind of a short story and then a principle that might apply to the audience, which is there's this company called Red Sea Global, and they're a hotel development company, and they're mainly around the Red Sea. And they come into areas, and of course what happens with a lot of hotel development is that the local community is not valued, they're not heard. Sometimes they're occasionally moved out of a certain area. So there's a lot of problems that can arise from that. And Red Sea Global wanted to change that. And so they came in with the mindset that we're going to listen to the local community, and we're really going to listen. And this is always the hard part. They did listen. And the locals asked for two things that seemed at first to be completely unrelated from their business model, but ended up being the key differentiators that made them succeed in the market. But at first, it seemed strange. The first one was that they wanted a banana farm. And the second was that they wanted sailboats, their traditional, authentic sailboats of their culture. Both things, most business people would say, that's great, but that's not really what I do. And Red Sea Global was going to be innovative about this. They said, okay, how are we going to make this work and make this make sense for our business model? So they invested in the banana farms. They made huge investments into agriculture around the area and created a very unique farm-to-table experience that differentiated them in the market and got very high ratings for all of their restaurants. In fact, many of their guests actually went specifically to the hotel for those experiences. They also invested in sailboats, which became a very unique cultural experience that people could enjoy when going to their hotels, that no other hotel had these unique sailing experiences. So specifically for people who were interested in sailing, this was an experience you could have nowhere else in the world. And so in terms of embracing the local culture, actually became their key differentiator in the market. And I think this is particularly true for hospitality. Sometimes it doesn't always make sense at first, and you do have to make that initial investment into really understanding the local culture, understanding how that connects with the business model. However, if you take that time to really invest in the local culture and bring that local culture into your experience, it wildly differentiates you in the market. And this is something that the most successful hotels actually do, is they bring in the local culture to some degree. And so when you're thinking about differentiating yourself in the market, that's something you should be thinking about. You should be thinking about bringing in that unique cultural element, because hotels are not buildings that stand alone, right? They're a whole experience. They're a whole community around it. This is what you mentioned with community. It's really important that we think about collaborating with our entire community, because that experience is really what you're selling. And it involves that entire environment around you. So you have to be thinking about bringing that in a way that feels meaningful, it feels authentic, and helps customers keep coming back.
Very good. In fact, most of the staff working in the hotel, they are from that community, in fact. Right. So it actually it proves a point. And also, if it's done well, then certain hotels now are having a policy that they only buy their products from local community and no more than, let's say, 100 miles away. So if you're in an area where it's 100 miles away and only the fruits and vegetables and root vegetables that are growing there, that's available only in the hotel's menu. So if somebody who's asking for a nice glass of fresh squeezed Valencia orange from Spain, they will be a little bit disappointed. But when you say that, well, we have some actually fresh apple juice from our farm here, and that actually is a local product, and that is something that we will see more and more hotels taking on board, that we are not actually there to please the customer, but also we are looking at the community and also to serve those community suppliers. And in a way, we are giving an authentic experience. When you say that this apple is from the apple farm here nearby, and it tastes very good, that says something more than getting a orange juice, because it doesn't actually relate to the location.
You're selling a memory.
Absolutely. Exactly. Wow, you really sound like a hotelier. I like that. What responsibilities should companies hold in reversing environmental damage, and how accountable should they be to communities directly affected? Because it's always an ongoing discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where, there's been this huge trend in the market towards regenerative hospitality. And what that really means is saying, how can we move away from simply preventing harm to actually investing in a way that makes sense for the business model? And just to kind of address the harm piece first, it's really important to be thinking about, okay, we do need to reduce harm. That's a fundamental part of it, because that does affect the bottom line. And there's companies like Seabin that are a great example of this. So Seabin actually creates trash cans that exist in the sea for litter and debris, for specifically coastal hospitality, when we're thinking of that, debris that come from the sea, so that they don't wash up on shore, because that does end up affecting the hotel experience. And if you have huge mounds of plastic, even if you didn't produce it, if it's coming from the sea and washing up on your beaches, that does end up affecting your hotel, it does end up affecting the experience. So Seabin has been, making a great business model out of this in terms of cleaning up the sea around those harbors and bays, and they just went IPO recently. So there's a lot of organizations and a lot of companies that you can partner with to reduce that harm, so that you can make sure that you're giving the best experience to your customer. Then beyond that, when we're thinking about, okay, not just reducing harm, but really investing in nature itself, that becomes the really interesting and wonderful part of it. So when we think about something just as simple as planting trees, let's think about planting trees around your hotel. It actually increases your property value by up to 15% just by planting trees. That's an incredible ROI when you think of a few cents for a tree seed. And you think of the 15% increase in valuation of your property. That's just talking about the real estate aspect of your property. That's incredible. And that also does translate to customer loyalty and retention, and also increasing the value that you can also charge your customers as well too. So thinking about investing in nature is an incredible piece of hospitality. One great hotel that many people might know is called Six Senses. It's in the Seychelles and it's a luxury experience. But you'll see there's, all these nature elements that are coming into the hotel room. You have huge boulders and beautiful elements of nature that are actually coming into the hotel and surrounding the guests. And that is one of the reasons why they're able to charge so much, which I think is an interesting element of it. When you have nature quite literally coming into the hotel room by having beautiful walls that are part of the natural space itself, people are willing to go out of their way to a hotel that offers that. And so when you're thinking about, okay, how do I want to invest in nature? Do I want to invest in surrounding my building, even with something as simple as trees? If you're a hotel that's in a city, for example, you can do that. You can surround your building with trees. You can have small, elements of plants on the balcony. All of those things actually increase your value significantly. And there's a huge ROI just in simple measures like that. But when you're wanting to think about how can I innovate beyond that, regenerative hospitality is all about thinking about, okay, how can nature be at the heart of this experience?
Very good. Yes, you are so right in that. Is the sustainable luxury market hypocritical given the luxury sector environmental impact, or can luxury generally drive meaningful change?
Yeah, so sustainable luxury actually normally allows for greater investment and also greater ROI. So when we think about coming back to increasing value of trees, or we think about trees also can actually prevent storms. And it's a pretty significant impact that it has. When you invest in a small area of land around your hotel, for example, then when you're planting trees, you can actually reduce the impact of a storm by over half. And it's really, really incredible to see that you can protect your facility, you can protect the experience by surrounding yourself in nature. And so even, I just want to kind of finish that thought, trees can even make people more peaceful. It's even shown to reduce violent crime. In neighborhoods that have more trees, it actually reduces violent crime. So it affects our psychology so much that we're less likely to commit a violent crime by simply seeing a tree. That's a pretty profound impact that it has. And so when we think about sustainable luxury, what we're able to do with that is we're actually able to invest more into the source of value that's enabling us to charge more and enable us to see a higher ROI. So we can see this with capital infrastructure investments like solar or reusables as well too. We can have that higher upfront cost that ends up actually reducing costs over time. But this is also good not just for sustainable luxury, this is also good for affordable accommodations as well. What you see with renewable energy is that it's actually the cheapest form of electricity that there is. And when we think about reusables long term, that actually does end up cutting down on long-term costs when we think about how can we have more reusables as a part of our experience. And it ends up actually delivering a lot more value too, because when you have things in glass and metal and wood and these natural elements, people want to come back and they actually have a more enjoyable experience. So there's a lot of information there, but I think that sustainable luxury offers you to invest more into what's giving the customers value.
Yeah, absolutely. Are regulatory frameworks around the world enough to support innovation we need in sustainability, or they hinder more than help?
No, I wouldn't say that regulation is enough. And regulation also isn't normally innovative enough to come up with the solutions that you need to be thinking about. So hotels need to be thinking about sustainability in their spaces. It's, a huge part of the business. And they're also heavily affected by pollution. So this is a fundamental part of the experience. There's really no way around it. And business people and innovators, they really have to think differently. And they have to be thinking in a way that's more innovative. I like to say an innovator is someone where others see a problem, they see a product. And so you have to be thinking about where is the opportunity here? The Nature Conservancy is great in assisting businesses with thinking about how can I invest in nature and actually get a profit out of it. There's other firms as well like that. But regulation, I think, will always assist. We see this, with solar. Solar, will be a little bit cheaper when regulatory environments come in. But the choice to choose solar is still a low-cost option irregardless. So I always think that regulation can always assist. It can always help us. But when it fundamentally comes to the innovation and breakthrough that delivers value for a business, that's something that only business consultants and business people can really support in.
Yeah, yeah. What is your opinion about, is it ethical for wealthy countries to set high sustainability standards when poorer nations struggle to meet basic development needs?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a huge discussion globally. When we think about, our wealthy countries or our less fortunate countries, more responsible for sustainability. But when you look at the data and you look at where the emissions are coming from, it's fundamentally a problem with wealthy countries. Wealthy countries are the real polluters. Yes. They're the ones that produce the majority of emissions. And even when you think about, in the U.S., we like to say we'll go tough on China a lot. It's a very popular phrase, and on their emissions, to go tough on them. But the ironic thing of it is that China produces almost 90% of the goods that we purchase. So they're manufacturing pretty much our goods. So it's a little ironic for us to blame them for something that we're buying. So it's fundamentally a lot of the emissions around the world are from wealthy countries, but also the emissions that are not from the wealthy world are also directly related to the wealthy world. So it's fundamentally important that wealthy countries actually be very critical of themselves more than anyone else. We are the mass over consumers, and we are the ones who have to lead. We have the ones to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, this is hard to do. No country finds this easy. We're the ones who have to be, the most responsible and invest the most in this. And there's so many great solutions out there that make business sense. We need to invest in those. We need to spend a little extra time to be really thinking about those. But it's so ironic when I hear countries talk about, oh yeah, we should be tough on Zimbabwe, which is a beautiful country, but they don't have really any emissions. I mean, they're not the ones who are really the creators of climate change or the ones responsible for it. It doesn't make any sense. So I think that the ROI also can be in wealthy countries as well too. Investing in these sustainable capital infrastructure projects, you're going to see the ROI in the wealthy world as well too. And of course, we need to partner with everyone, but we shouldn't play a blame game. We really need to look in the mirror and say, what are we doing wrong? That's how we have to solve this problem.
Yeah. I think the consumer has a lot of things to do with this. So what, if any, sacrifices should consumers make to support sustainable practices, and where should businesses lead instead?
Yeah, so in terms of what customers can do, and I mean customers both in a private sense, in a personal sense, as well as in a business sense as well, when you're thinking about which suppliers you want to purchase from. And, it's been very famous for some time to talk about boycotting. That's a pretty, familiar concept for most people. But there's a term I coined in my book, which is called pro-cotting. And that's actually where you go out of your way to sponsor a business that you believe in. And I think what's wonderful about this is it's also really enjoyable. It's really fun because you get to go out of your way to find a business that you truly believe in, that truly matters to you and you feel good about. So I think of, technologies. One of them that comes to mind is Aether diamonds. Aether diamonds, they actually take air pollution out of the air and create a diamond out of it. They take the carbon dioxide pollution in the air and they sequester it down and make a diamond out of it. Or Prometheus fuels, they have a similar technology. They take pollution out of the air and they turn it back into car fuel. There's these amazing technologies that wouldn't have been possible 10 years ago that are out there, that exist, that are already supplying to their customers. And you hop on that train. You should encourage them. You should be a part of that. I think that it's always a really great source of seeing what innovation is out there. So really go after the innovative suppliers. Go after the innovative consumer brands that are really talking to you and your values. Go out of your way. The only sacrifice I think that you should do is to spend a little extra time finding them. And, it can be something as simple as if I need, sustainable cosmetics or I need sustainable, fuel, whatever it happens to be. Go on Google and type in sustainable blank. And it sounds simple, but going out of your way to do a little extra homework, you will find there's an overwhelming amount of companies out there that are doing wonderful things, that are treating their employees well, that are treating the planet well, and giving you a very unique experience that you may have never thought of before. So I always think that if you're a consumer or you're a business trying to choose your suppliers, the sacrifice should be spending a little extra time to find the most innovative company in the market. And it'll always, kind of brighten your day a little bit too. I don't know, it kind of does that for me as well. But when you go and you find this really cool company doing something right, it definitely kind of makes you feel more positive as well.
Yeah, I feel the same too. Yeah. So in pursuing innovation and eco-friendly practices, is there a risk that industries are losing sight of foundational values like service and community?
I would say that no, because a huge part of innovation and sustainability is about bringing community into the experience. You think of something just as simple as using a plate that is a banana leaf. This is something that's true culturally in a lot of tropical cultures all over the world. It's a very sustainable. It's also very low cost to have these plates made out of banana leaves, and it also brings in the local culture into that experience. Fundamentally, when you think of whatever culture you're talking about, 7 generations back, what our great-great-great-grandmothers were doing is often very sustainable. So when we're thinking about sustainability being at the forefront and innovation being at the forefront, fundamentally bringing the cultures in and bringing the communities in aligns with that. And so I think that the biggest risk is not being able to move fast enough because markets right now are incredibly competitive. Innovation needs to be a part of your business offering. If you feel comfortable, that's the nudge you need to know that you need to start innovating because it's when you feel comfortable that your competitor or another business might disrupt the market, might start leading in the market. So you should never feel comfortable. You should always be innovating, always be thinking about how can I add more value to the products that I offer. So the real risk is that you won't move fast enough in the market. And sustainable organizations, what's interesting about them is that they're more likely to survive recessions. And the reason for that is because they're often more innovative. When you think, okay, times are hard, I'm not going to invest in innovation, which is very frequently what you hear a lot of businesses saying. Okay, times are tough. I'm just going to try to survive. I'm not going to try to innovate or change. That's when you actually need the innovation the most because it might make the difference between you surviving and not surviving. And so that's why sustainable organizations actually tend to survive through tough times, tend to survive through recessions. It's because they're willing to innovate, even when times are hard.
Yeah, I mean, there's an attitude that it's like you should think like a startup that when you started your business and when you are at your best at the moment. So, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. How should companies prioritize sustainability when it might conflict with short-term financial gains and investor expectations?
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't seen it really conflict with short-term financial gains, but it normally has a longer-term reach. So when you think about something like solar, oftentimes the payback period for that is going to be anywhere from 1 year to 5 years. And so what's really important, I see, is the difference just between the short-term gain and the long-term gain. And what you really need to be doing throughout that process is communicating the payback period on a lot of the investments into innovation. So Larry Fink, who's CEO of BlackRock, he's a controversial figure, but I think what's interesting about his literature is that he often talks about fighting back against this quarterly reporting format on Wall Street, whereas actually just switching to an annual reporting format enables them to invest heavily into innovation. It's very hard to see returns on innovation or sustainability within a 3-month time frame, but within a year you actually can see the ROI on it. So it's really the difference between a quarter and a year and 2 years. That's really the difference that we're talking about. We're not talking about a 10-year out time frame. And so really what you need to be doing with the investor is making sure that they're not too short-sighted. You need to be constantly communicating whatever it is, whatever program you're talking about with them. We're not thinking about a quarter, we're thinking about a year or 2 years. And constantly be continuing that because you need to survive in the short term and in the long term. So when you're talking to the investor, you need to say, we need to balance both. We need to balance the quarterly report and we need to balance a 2-year time frame, mindset. So always when you're talking to your investors, you should be always reminding them that thinking from a 2-year time frame is also just as important as thinking about a quarterly timeline. So you need to have metrics, you need to be constantly communicating that and making sure they're not losing sight of that long-term vision.
Yeah, so true. Do you believe true innovation in sustainability will only come when there's a fundamental shift in human values? If so, what does that shift look like?
No, I think that the markets actually are really demanding continuing innovation. And innovation needs to continue for, again, not just that 1 year period, but onwards. And so the only way to do that is to integrate the long term into your mindset. When I think of, the really foundational investors in solar, a lot of them were pension funds, which is kind of interesting. They were the ones that really invested in solar in the early days to bring down the price and to really invest in the technology. This is actually not because it was morally right or because they had a sustainability focus at all. It's what made most business sense, because thinking from a 30-year out standpoint at that time, solar made the most sense in terms of its return on investment. So whenever you integrate the long term into your business model, innovation and sustainability thrive. And so, I think that what we're seeing right now is that, we really need to be thinking about that long-term survival. And so sustainability is fundamentally a part of that because it enables us to think out of the box to be able to innovate.
Yeah, we're also thinking about the generation that is 5-6 years old, and what kind of world are we leaving to them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Vanessa, I have 2 more questions before we wrap up. And one question I'd like to ask all my guests, besides what we talked about, which was a lot, what trends do you see happening in hospitality that hoteliers should take note of?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think actually in a way it does tie in a bit. But I think that one of the things that I see as a trend in hospitality is really bringing in very unique experiences, particularly what we see with the crowd that is under, 35. This particular generation of consumers is particularly interested in experiences, even more than luxury goods. Services are, on the rise, and they're particularly important for this crowd. So, they're spending more of their disposable income on hospitality, on services, than the previous generations that were more likely to invest in luxury goods than luxury services. So this is something that's particularly relevant for them, and making sure that we're incorporating their values into it is also what enables you to differentiate yourself in the market. And one of the key ways is including community and culture into your experience so that you can differentiate yourself in the market. There's a lot of noise out there, and so making sure that you stand out is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So lastly, if people are interested to find more about the sustainability experts and what you do in terms of keynote speeches, I know you've been on TED Talk and so on, so how can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we also have our own podcast as well, too, in addition to the keynotes, which you can find on Spotify, you can find on Apple Podcasts, all the typical podcast platforms. But if you're interested in looking at us for speaking, consulting, or looking at the podcast, I really recommend connecting with us on LinkedIn. That's really the site that we're able to connect and collaborate with the most people on. And you can find us at The Sustainability Experts. And our website is the-sustainability-experts.com. And coming shortly in the next week, vanessathompson.com will also be the go-to place for keynote speaking. So we would love to collaborate with you and learn from you. If you just want to share, a really interesting experience that you think would be helpful for the sustainability experts, feel free to reach out to us.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Vanessa. This has been a very good discussion. I learned a lot about you and also about your values and what you stand for. So thank you very much again. It has been a delight. Thank you.
Thank you so much.